Hello class and welcome to this Super C NES walkthrough right here on Video Games 101 by way of Let's Play with Brigands. I'm your instructor, Professor Brigands, and Super C, the sequel to the original Contra, which in terms of difficulty, if you saw our class on the original Contra, you'll remember we did a bit of a novel thing for Video Games 101. We assigned it two different difficulties. One, if you play the game with the spreader, as we call it, the spread gun, and Blaze is going to talk more about this. The game is a 4 out of 10, which on the frustration scale equates to maybe biting down on your controller a couple times. Maybe if you lose that spreader for a second, but you get it back, you play through, you beat the game. It's all good. Play it without the spreader. This game quickly ratchets up double the difficulty, an 8 out of 10, which equates to, on the frustration scale, writing a threatening letter to the developer, in this case Konami. But don't worry. Won't have to pick up a pen, no biting down on your controller in this class. We have a number of tips getting you through this game just fine. Gary's got a number of very helpful boss beaters. Blaze has your weapons and item pickups overview. And as we generally do with these shorter games, this game is pretty short like its predecessor. We're going to bring in Fluff early to give us some facts about this game before we get into the walkthrough. So Fluff, what do you got?
Super C is the unaccountable name given to the NES port of Konami's arcade sequel to the original Contra, Super Contra. I say unaccountable because I kinda hate how they tried to get cute with the name. I'm by no means a marketing cat, Professor. I don't claim to have any facts in the field of branding, but I know enough that when you release an extremely popular video game in America, you might want to keep some semblance of the name when you put out the sequel. I mean, Super C? What the heck is that about? Just call it Contra 2, Konami. You obviously had no problems with numbers when you got to this game's sequel and calling it Contra 3, though ironically that was on the SNES, where every friggin' game's title was prefaced with a super.
Wow, you're really getting worked up there, Fluff.
I just hate bad branding, Professor. I mean, someone actually got paid to come up with Super C as a title. You have this awesome name in Contra, and what do? They bury it.
So you must really hate the whole Greiser thing, then.
The what?
Oh, in Europe, Contra was released under the title Greiser.
What the heck is wrong with Konami, Professor? That's awful. Can you imagine being a little British kid in the early 90s saying, "Can I rent Greiser for my NES, please?"
Well, Greiser was the name of Contra in the arcades in Europe. The NES port of Contra in Europe was called Probotector.
What the fuck?
Alright, before we get into the game, we're not going to be using this, but Fluff, is there some sort of life code for this game like there was in the original Contra?
Speaking of things that didn't need to change, the classic Konami code that we covered in our class on the original Contra doesn't apply here in, Super C. Instead, on the title screen, players can input right, left, down, up, A, B, and then start to begin the game with 10 lives. Alternatively, you can add a select in before hitting start to extend this courtesy to the second player as well. This is compared to the 30 lives that you got via the Konami code in the original Contra, though you still get 30 lives by inputting this code in the Japanese Famicom version of this game, which is thankfully titled Super Contra.
Yep, they knew. Alright, so let's begin our game now with the default number, 3 lives right here, and take a look at the controls for Super C. Exactly the same as Contra. Shoot with B, jump with A, hold down to lie down, duck underneath bullets essentially, and hold up to aim. As we take a look now at the Briggs notes for the Super C NES walkthrough, the keys to beating this game: first, always be shooting. If you want to use turbo, it helps, but you can also just grab yourself one of the automatic guns. Very important in this game, but speaking of the guns, spreader. The spread gun, as it's officially called, for the win. It's the difference between a 4 and an 8, as we covered in the intro on the difficulty scale. I recommend getting it as early as possible and holding on to it for as long as possible. We have our first one coming up in just a moment here. Lastly, use Gary's boss beaters. He has tips for taking down every boss as easily, safely, and quickly as possible, so we'll bring him in for each boss we come up against. You can see the flamethrower looks a little bit different in Super C as it did in the last one, but Blaze is going to talk about that. So there is our first spread gun right there. Hopefully our last as well, if we're playing our cards right. You can see the spread which we get on it, hence the name, but it requires very little in terms of accuracy, more of just, as long as you're hitting that button, you're pretty much guaranteed to hit your target if they're in front of you. Very useful in this game, as is Gary with the first boss beater.
It's Scary Gary's Boss Beater.
First boss in Super C, the helicopter. Pretty simple with the spreader, like most bosses in this game. Here you just want to stay in that low part of the ground, so you have more time to shoot any enemies who come toward you. Just aim up and shoot. You'll hit multiple turrets at once. Once it's just that weak spot showing, you can jump up at that point. Don't have to worry about the projectiles so much. And just fire away at that, you'll take it down.
Thank you, Gary. A pretty easy boss, no matter what gun you have on that first stage right there. So in the second area here, you'll remember probably in the first Contra that they had those base levels where it was sort of that strange from-behind perspective, and the controls were a little stiff there. Now they just switched this to a kind of a straight-up overhead type view as we're moving bottom to top. Sort of like the bonus stages, if you will, from Bionic Commando when you're on those trucks or meeting with the enemy and engaging, if you know what I'm talking about. You can check out our class on Bionic Commando, one of our favorites here on Video Games 101, via the playlist in the description. But yeah, once again, the spreader's still very useful on this screen, even if it's not the side-scrolling portions. You would think some of the guys dressed in red would be dropping pick-me-ups, power-ups, like in the first game. Not the case here. They float across the screen as we're trying to avoid this miniature Tactitas, this little bullet hell right here. As much as these Contra games get. Not too difficult to thread the needle with these bullets, though, in most cases. They don't move all that fast, honestly, so generally plenty of time to react, even though we're not moving as fast. Corporal Lance, our character, aka Scorpion, joined by two-player mode Sergeant Bilko. Wonder where they came up with that. Mad Dog. Anyway, second boss, Gary.
Boss Beaters.
Alright, the tank, you want to keep your distance, staying on the opposite side as that tank while shooting those gunners. Retreat to the opposite side when they start to get closer to you, prioritizing dodging the bullets rather than getting those shots in. And then once you're clear, repeat the process, fire from a distance, you'll take it down.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, the faster you can take out these gunmen who are trying to kill you, the less bullets you'll have on the screen, simpler it will all be. By the way, you snag an extra life every 25,000 points, I believe. Doesn't say in the instruction manual, and you can't check your score in real time. You can only check it between the stages, but yeah, generally speaking, every 25,000 has been my experience. So we are heading back to the jungle here, very similar to the look of the first stage in the first Contra. Yeah, Scorpion and Mad Dog, modeled after Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Noticed no smoking of cigarettes on the cover this time, or on the title screen, I should say, like we had in the original game. Still surprised that got past the censors, Nintendo's censorship policy of the late 80s, early 90s, which Fluff mentioned in our class on that one. Just, yeah, get as many shots in as you keep moving. Careful not to touch it while it's still exploding. It'll kill you there. That missile launcher. But yeah, they didn't even have Scorpion and Mad Dog on the title screen of this one. It's like they, Nintendo said, hey, Mad Dog, you can be on the title screen, but no cigarettes this time. And he said, no deal. No one's gonna tell me what I can or can't do. More shallow jumps here in the water. Keep that in mind. You can still duck underneath the water to avoid bullets right there. Just make sure you don't get surrounded, you know. Don't get lazy like I like to do sometimes. Waiting until that last possible second to shoot the enemies behind me, but sometimes by then you have too much going on the screen. But anyway, got a mini-boss coming up here. Let's throw it back to Gary for this one.
Boss Beaters.
Alright, Babalu Destructoid mechanism, according to the manual, of course. You want to stay on top of this walking spider-like creature until they start moving to the edge of one side of the screen. Then you want to jump off, run to the opposite side, and just start firing. Duck down underneath those projectiles. They fire at you, but repeat this process. Jump back on top when you start to get cornered. Eventually you'll take him down.
Thank you, Gary. Capcom very sneaky here. They give you the invincibility, and you know it only lasts a certain amount of time. So your instinct might be to run to the right as quickly as possible. That will cost you a life, as you can see with the tremors here. Parts of the ground disappear. Best strategy is just to inch forward, go one block at a time essentially, wait and see what the next block of ground next to you is going to do, and then react accordingly, as we're doing right here. But yeah, that one invincibility right there, not even that helpful in this stretch, because there's relatively very few enemies running around at this point. Once the ground stops shaking, you know it's safe again. And you know it's safe again because we got Gary for tips on our next boss.
Boss beaters.
The supercomputer. Those turrets are moving around, but just want to bait those bullets and then dodge when they all fire. Then just shoot at those turret points when you have a chance. Repeat the process like we show. Not too difficult.
Nope. Neuter it first, and then yeah, just go for that centerpiece after that. So while we're cleaning up here and heading into the next stage, let's get an overview of the items and weapons of Contra with Blaze.
Alright, let's talk about the items and weapons you can pick up in Super C. Starting with the Mega Shell. Just like in the original Contra, this kills everything on the screen. Next we have the Barrier. Also like the original Contra, gives you 8 seconds of invincibility. Just be careful. There's no indication when it's about to wear off, so just be aware of that. Next, we have the Rapid Fire. This allows you to fire your weapons in faster succession as you tap B. Just like in the original Contra, the Spread Gun, aka the Spreader, it's my award for the best gun here in Super C. Fanning out, you don't have to be accurate. Best gun in this game. Thankfully, they fixed the flamethrower in this game finally, meaning it's not complete garbage anymore. Now it fires a much faster shot which explodes and fires projectiles out upon impact. Much better. The same unfortunately can't be said for the laser, which is still virtually the same, firing a thin beam out and remaining completely impractical for a bullet hell platformer where your survival is dependent upon taking out as many of the targets on the screen as possible, which is again why that spreader is so useful. And then lastly, the machine gun, just a nice rapid fire gun with the gift of turbo here in Super C without your having to go down to your local Toys R Us to grab an NES Max. What was the deal with that wheel, Professor?
Yeah, fair question. We had one, or a couple growing up, and I guess the wheel just made for smoother transitions between directions than the D-pad would, the conventional D-pad, but yeah, I think I still have one or both of them around here somewhere. And probably with the teeth marks on there, which I put on there. Yeah, we're not kidding with our rating systems. They're all based in fact. They're all based in experience. I think I may have had anger issues as a child. Worked my way out of those. Of course, it doesn't hurt to have the best TAs in the business, helping, guiding us through these games, making everything a little more manageable. A little calmer. Just like the spreader's making everything a little bit calmer, taking out these targets as soon as they appear, but anyway, while we're very slowly moving up to the top of this stage, let's bring in Fluff for another Fluff fact about Super C.
So, I looked into that Probotector game, the title they released Contra under in Europe. Awful names aside, at least they knew to call the sequel to that game, which, to be clear, is in fact the European or PAL region version of this game, Probotector 2. The name change is actually a reference to the fact that the main characters and many of the alien enemies in that game were replaced by robots. So, there you go. Probotector. Ugh.
Yeah, purportedly I think they made the change because some German federal agency basically banned games which glorified war or something about that, but I guess there's a loophole if you use robots instead. I don't know. Anyone play that game growing up? Any Europeans in the class? Gary?
Boss beaters.
Crusher / a lamp, I don't know, but note the end-to-end pattern it uses to fire its projectiles at you. Note that even if you take out some of those teeth of this boss, it will act as if those are still there, so it'll add that delay in before you get those shots, as you can see, essentially. But use this pattern, keep that in mind, to avoid getting shot, and get your shots in when you can from a safe spot.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, that back and forth, left to right, it can kind of do your head in a little bit, especially once you start taking out some of those turrets from the boss right there. And yeah, look at that. Just to follow up on something that I mentioned earlier, saying that I believed you got an extra life every 25,000 points. We just passed 100,000 and we have 7 lives without having lost any, so little basic math, that checks out. Fresh life every 25,000 points. And this is your obligatory friendship and or relationship ending stage right here. This is the one where if you jump too quickly, if you scroll up the screen too quickly, or +1, if you're playing with a second player, will get left behind and lose a life. So Konami just fine with, tight little window right there, just fine with continuing to drive a wedge between all types of relationships, sibling, significant other, friendships. They do not care at Konami, and I kind of respect that, honestly. They may have changed the title, still kind of irks me, but the gameplay as solid as ever. And I should acknowledge we've had a lot of fun at the title of this game's expense, but strictly speaking, I believe Nintendo of America, they wanted to change to Super C just to remove any connotations with the Iran-Contra affair of the 80s, so acting like the C stood for Commando, come on, we know better, Nintendo. And obviously didn't last long, they ultimately went back to the Contra name, but anyway, we're coming up on the next boss here, so must have just hit 125,000 points with tips on the boss for Area 5. Here's Gary.
Boss beaters.
Like the Krypto-Crustacean, want to prioritize destroying the projectiles and skulls. Just get those hits in when you can, basically. Take care of yourself first and foremost. When the boss comes down, duck, hit the ground, hit the deck. Just watch out for those projectiles if there's a lot on the screen at the same time, as that could end quite poorly.
Ooh, that was a gimme. Yeah, playing a little sloppy here, not clearing the screen. But we took it down. No death run intact. 5-6, 5-6 on the ground. Not sure what the significance is there, except for the fact we're moving from Area 5 to Area 6 here. For another top-down stage. This is one where you might need a little bit of luck to keep your no death run intact or to stay alive in general. Enemies called liposuctions, and you'll see why they're named as such right there. Just coming out of the ground here. Picking up that M would be just as bad as losing a life right there. I find if you stay on the right, it's a little bit safer. Just kind of take your time, make sure you know what's in front of you. Not to say they can't appear underneath you as well, but... And if you're fast enough with the spreader, you can take down those or any gun that you have, but certainly the spreader to spread out a bit more of the damage, you can take them down. This feels very much like a stretch from Legendary Wings, which we did a class on not too long ago. Again, check it out via the playlist in the description of this video. Kind of that penultimate stage right there. Just shoot this wall. Anytime you come up with a barrier, just unload upon it. And that is a lot of heads right there. Same basic idea. Little sweet spot right there where shots can't hit you, but Gary?
Boss beaters.
Just gonna call this one the alien horror, but defeating it is anything but. You just stand right in front of its face, where we show, and fire away as that kind of miniature alien just circles you, but it'll be dead before it figures out how to actually hit you, class.
Yeah, it's pretty satisfying. I know it's cheap in these Contra games, but just standing in front of whatever the boss may be, like that D-pad at the end of, I think it was Area 7 in the original Contra, that first stage boss, basically a very similar type of thing, or even getting in front of the heart after you've neutered all those aliens out, but I digress. On to Area 7, and this time we're doing a top to bottom scroll. See those little alien clusters moving slowly towards you there. Should be able to take them out before they become a problem. Just be mindful of the enemies, the aliens walking up behind you. I wouldn't try to get right in front of it, underneath that waterfall of alien bile. I'm not really sure what you want to call that. Just don't let it touch you. Everything kills you in this game. Anything that touches you. Like it. Enemies not even shooting at you or punching you sometimes, just rubbing up on their skin. Automatic death right there. And very reminiscent of Super Mario 2, the Doki Doki version, which we did a class here on Video Games 101 on in the past. Might be the one instance where the spreader is not the ideal weapon, just because, I mean, it gives us more room to maneuver, but not the most efficient way. What's Toad doing right now? Can we get him on the line? Need him to dig this out for us with his Super Mario Bros. 2 style. What? Oh.
Yahoo!
Hi, Toad. What's going on?
It's time to rock and roll!
Yeah. It's good to see. Oh, what have you been up to?
I'm the fantastic fungus!
Right.
The supercharged mushroom of night!
Sure.
I'm the Toad Warrior!
Toad, I don't mean to be rude. I appreciate you stopping by, but, like, you gotta get a publicist or something. I mean, we snap our fingers, just mention your name, and you appear. I mean, we barely have 10,000 subscribers, Toad.
I'm the best!
I would think if you were the best, you wouldn't just show up when someone says your name. You know, there'd be a process, maybe a booking agent we'd have to go through, but
Hey, man!
You know what, Toad? Actually, we're up against the wall here. We're about to hit a boss, so we're gonna have to say goodbye, but thanks for showing up. Well, that was awkward. Gary?
Boss beaters.
Alright, the Temple of Terror, just stand in the center and spread away like we show. You'll hit all the projectiles, won't even need to move this time, class. Take it down.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, spreader works just fine here, as you can see. Taking out the, you gotta see an ear, nose, and throat guy there. Tower of Terror. Whatever you're called. Anyway. Big thanks to Toad for stopping by, I guess. Be nice to have Princess Peach here, by the way. No? Okay, well, on to the final area now. Doing pretty well on lives here, and you can see kind of a similar look to the final stage in the original Contra. Got these enemies which spit out projectiles. Good idea to take this screen a little bit more slowly and take out all those to make the screen a little bit safer. Grab the repeater, make this fire just a little bit faster. Just kind of changes up the pattern on the spreader a little bit. That would reset it to the regular spreader if we pick that up. Not the end of the world, but kind of like the repeater. Hit the deck as soon as you get to the top of this hill right here to avoid the shot from the Jagger Freud's Spit Soldier, it's called. Official name according to the manual, and once again hit the deck here. This is kind of tricky because you got aliens coming up behind you, red falcons. Members of the baddie organization here. Yeah, I don't always get through that unscathed though, just the kind of the timing between the two. You have to make a really desperate jump right there. Oh, that was a gimme as well. To avoid that, we have one last little stretch here before the final boss, where the ceiling is gonna come down, kind of do that that crushing up and down, and it won't actually kill you, but it will stunt your jump height, obviously. And then combined with these little projectile enemies which float in and move kind of slowly and predictably, but combine this with some platforming here in a second, and it's a little dangerous. Good rule of thumb is to make sure you clear out as many of those enemies as possible before you make any jumps as soon as they appear, and have as much room to maneuver, walk around on as possible. Yeah, this is where the spreader is a godsend, because if you can clear them out just from a couple shots, you can't shoot through that ceiling. That was a little close, but whole lot safer. Again, it's the difference between an 8 and a 4 in this game. The spread gun. Live by it, die by it. Not sure I used that expression correctly, but yeah, time to drop down here. Manage with a few final red falcons, and time for the final boss, which is kind of a disappointment after the one in the first game. But Gary, take us home.
Boss beaters.
The final boss here in Super C, I wish I could say it required a more clever strategy than this, but just stand in front of that lower of the two faces, aim up and to the right, and spread for the win. And just like that, you have beaten Super C. Congratulations.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, shoot fast enough. don't have to worry about the projectiles there. Spreader for the win. Quite literally here, as we get to enjoy the ending now. Big thanks to all my TAs today, by the way, for helping me out. And I guess Toad, that was nice. And yeah, if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to enroll in these classes. We do one of these classes every single week in the same spot. We'd love to have you enrolled. Click that like button as well if you don't mind. It really does help us out to make future classes for you. And leave a comment on this one. Did you play this one nearly as much as you played the original Contra? Were you maybe one of the folks maybe didn't even realize this was the sequel to the original Contra? Or at the very least, maybe you're just like Fluff, like I am to some extent, and just think Super C is a really stupid name for the sequel to Contra. But that's our time. We hope to see you next week in the same spot for next week's class, right here on Video Games 101. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and comment on this video, and click subscribe if you haven't already, as this seriously helps me to keep making great content for you. And check the description of this video to see what song is playing right now.